Veteran and his dog saved a little girl from a fire. Hours later, her mom, a CEO, appeared with a check. The fire had already swallowed half the house when Colton Hayes rounded the corner at the edge of the cul-de-sac. Thick plumes of black smoke curled into the pre-dawn sky, glowing orange at the base like a terrible sunrise. Sirens were still a distant echo. No firefighters, no help, only chaos. It was 5:13 a.m., and Vermont's cold bit at the edge of his breath. Shadow, the German shepherd always pacing a half step ahead, froze mid-stride and let out a sharp bark. That was when Colton heard it, faint at first, muffled behind the roar of fire, but unmistakable. A child crying. Colton stopped cold. For half a second, the street fell away, and he was back in Helmand, back in the heat and smoke and screaming. But this was not Afghanistan. This was real. Now, without a word, he sprinted toward the burning house, Shadow at his side. Neighbors were standing in their robes, clutching phones, panicked and helpless. Someone shouted, "The baby's still inside!" But Colton was already moving. He stripped off his jacket and yanked the sleeve over his mouth. Shadow growled low beside him, ears sharp, waiting. "Stay with me," Colton muttered, and then, without hesitation, he kicked in the front door. Flames licked the ceiling. The heat hit like a wall, fierce and blinding. Smoke clawed at his throat as he dropped low, scanning with watering eyes. "Hello?" he called out. "Is anyone here?" A whimper came from the far left, behind a staircase, under a collapsed beam. He darted toward it, stumbling over fallen debris, ignoring the sharp burn across his forearm as an ember grazed his skin. There she was. A small girl, no older than 3, curled in the corner beneath a thick cloud of smoke. Blonde curls matted with soot, pink dress torn at the hem. Her wide, tear-streaked face lifted when she saw him. Her lips formed no words, only a soundless sob. Colton knelt instantly, scooping her up. She trembled against him. "I've got you," he murmured, wrapping her in his jacket. "You're okay. We're getting out of here." "Shadow," he called. The dog appeared through the smoke like a ghost, ears perked, eyes focused. Colton pointed. "Find the way." Shadow turned and bolted, tail high, weaving through flames with precision that came from years of training in places far more dangerous than this. Colton followed, crouching, every muscle screaming. Rosie coughed against his chest. He felt her fingers dig into his shirt. They burst through the doorway seconds before the roof gave a groan behind them. The night air hit them like a wave. Rosie gasped, breathing deep and desperate. Colton staggered to the curb, fell to his knees, holding her tight. Shadow circled once, then sat like a statue, eyes scanning, ears twitching. People rushed forward, blankets, flashlights, questions. A woman cried out, "She's safe, the baby's safe." Relief rippled through the gathered crowd. A paramedic knelt by Colton. "Sir, your hand is burned. We need to treat you. What's your name?" Colton didn't answer. He looked down at the little girl in his arms. She had stopped crying. Her tiny hand was wrapped around his dog tag. "You're a soldier?" the medic asked gently. Colton nodded once. "Sir, we really need your name for the report." But Colton was already standing, lifting Rosie into the arms of the EMT. "Take care of her," he said hoarsely. The woman beside him caught his arm. "At least tell us who you are." He shook his head. "Doesn't matter." With that, he turned. Shadow rose silently beside him. Together, they walked away from the fire, into the cold quiet of the trees beyond the neighborhood. His arm throbbed with pain. His lungs burned. But behind him, a child was safe. And that was enough. Lisa Marlowe stepped off the red-eye flight with her heart already racing. Her phone had rung midway through descent, 2 missed calls from the nanny, followed by a voice message that made her blood run cold. "There's been a fire. Rosie is safe, but..." The rest blurred. She was already running through the terminal. By the time her car pulled up to the hospital, it was nearly dawn. She flung the door open before the car stopped and sprinted across the icy parking lot, heels sliding, lungs burning. Inside, She found Rosie curled up in a hospital bed, sleepy but safe, wrapped in a warm blanket. Her pink dress was singed, cheeks streaked with ash. A nurse offered a soft smile. "She's okay, just smoke exposure, very lucky." Lisa dropped to her knees beside the bed, tears falling before she could stop them. She kissed her daughter's soot-smeared forehead, whispering apologies, holding her like she might vanish. How did she get out?" She choked. The nurse checked the chart. A man pulled her out. "Local, former military, we think. He refused treatment and left before we got his name." Lisa froze. "He just left?" "He made sure your daughter was safe. Then he disappeared." That was all she needed. For the next 2 days, Lisa searched. She called local fire crews, spoke with neighbors, asked the police. One name came up more than once. Colton Hayes. Lives out by the mill trail. Keeps to himself. The next morning, she drove there. The cabin sat quiet among snow-laced trees, modest and weathered. A German shepherd lay on the steps, ears alert. He didn't bark as she approached, just watched her, steady and still. The door opened. Colton stepped out, bandage on his hand, expression unreadable. Taller than she expected, broad, solid, like someone who had seen too much and said too little for far too long. She walked up the path, envelope in hand. "Are you Colton Hayes?" He nodded once. "I'm Lisa Marlowe," she said, voice tight. "Rosie's mother." His eyes flickered, but he said nothing. She held out the envelope. "This is a check. $50,000. I know it's not enough. It never could be. But you saved my daughter. I have to thank you." Colton looked at the envelope, then at her. His voice was low, steady. "I don't want your money." Lisa blinked. "Please, I have the means. I want to help. I didn't do it for a reward," he said. "I heard a child crying. That was enough." She stared at him. "But you ran into a burning house." He shrugged. "Some lives are worth the risk." Lisa's words failed. The weight of what he'd done and what he refused to take in return hung between them. This man, rough around the edges, quiet as snowfall, had walked into fire for a child he had never met, and now he stood here, asking for nothing. Tears filled her eyes. "You didn't even stay long enough for us to thank you." He looked away, almost embarrassed. She was safe, that's all that mattered. Silence stretched. Then Lisa said softly, "You're the kind of man I thought didn't exist anymore." Colton didn't respond. He gave a small nod and turned back toward the door. The dog stood and followed without a sound. Lisa stayed on the path a moment longer, the envelope still in her hand, her breath a thin cloud in the cold air. She didn't leave the check behind, but deep down, she knew. There are some debts money can never repay. After the day she stood on his porch and offered a check he refused, Lisa could not stop thinking about him. Not because he rejected the money, though that in itself had shaken her, but because of something deeper, something she saw in his eyes before he turned away. They were the eyes of a man who had walked through fire long before the house ever burned. Colton Hayes returned to his quiet life in the woods as though nothing had changed. Each morning, he split firewood behind the cabin, walked the forest trail with Shadow, and drank his coffee in silence. But some part of his world had tilted slightly, though he would never admit it. Rosie had started asking to visit him. "She misses Shadow," Lisa said one day, standing at his gate with a half-smile and a basket in her hand. "I made cinnamon bread. Thought maybe she could come by for a few minutes." Colton hesitated, but only for a moment. Then he stepped aside. "She can come." It became a quiet ritual. Every few days, Lisa and Rosie would stop by. Sometimes they brought cookies, other times muffins. Rosie would sit on the front steps with Shadow, babbling to him as if he were another child. Lisa never stayed long, but each time she came, she observed. She saw how Colton never once raised his voice, how he always placed a small towel by the front door when it rained, just in case Rosie stepped in mud. How he added a second bowl of water beside Shadow's, because Rosie once tried to feed him snow. She started to ask about him, quietly, in town. A retired police officer who lived down the road told her, Colton served in the Marines, lost his best friend to an IED. They were on patrol. His buddy pushed him out of the blast zone. Another added, he came back different. Not dangerous, just distant. Like part of him stayed over there. It made sense. He lived simply. No TV, no internet. Just wood, tools, a dog, and quiet. One afternoon, Rosie came running toward Lisa from the cabin, face lit with joy. "Mommy! Come see, come see!" Lisa followed her up the steps and stopped. Beside the cabin door, a small wooden chair sat freshly sanded, low to the ground, just the right size for a toddler. Carved clumsily into the backrest were the words, "Rosie's Spot." Lisa blinked. "Did you make this?" Colton looked up from where he had been wiping sawdust from his hands. "She's always sitting on the steps. Thought she deserved a real seat." Lisa stared at the chair, touched the rough letters with her fingers. "You carved her name." He shrugged. "Came out crooked." "It's perfect," she said quietly. Rosie immediately plopped into the chair and declared, "This is where I'll eat my cinnamon bread forever." Lisa laughed, and Colton actually smiled. Not a half smirk, not a twitch of the mouth, a real smile. It faded quickly, but she had seen it. Later, as the sun began to dip behind the pines, Lisa sat on the edge of the porch while Rosie played with Shadow. She did not speak, neither did Colton. There was no need. The birds sang overhead, the wind rustled through the trees, and for once, Lisa allowed herself to breathe. It was the kind of silence that did not feel empty, but full, like something fragile and rare. Then Colton crouched down beside Rosie and said, "Want to learn something special?" She nodded, wide-eyed. He pursed his lips and let out a sharp whistle. Shadow instantly perked up and trotted over. "Your turn," Colton said. Rosie tried once, no sound. Tried again, nothing. The third time, a faint, high-pitched note came out. Shadow lifted his head. Rosie gasped, delighted. "I did it," Colton chuckled. "Told you, just takes practice." Lisa watched them, her daughter laughing, Colton kneeling beside her, Shadow wagging his tail, and something in her chest softened. It was not a family, but it was something. Something real, something growing, something worth holding on to. Colton stood on Lisa's front porch, his breath clouding the frosty air. From inside, warm light spilled through the windows, flickering with gold and amber hues. He hesitated, adjusting the collar of his coat. For years, Christmas had meant solitude, silence, and memories that stung sharper than any winter wind. But tonight, something felt different. He knocked once. The door swung open almost immediately. "Uncle Bear!" Rosie squealed, launching herself into his arms before he could say a word. Her tiny hands clutched a card wrapped in silver ribbon. She wore a fluffy pink princess dress, her curls bouncing as she hugged him tight. Colton caught her with a soft grunt, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Hey, kiddo." Lisa appeared behind her daughter, wiping her hands on a red kitchen towel. She wore a forest green sweater and jeans, casual but effortlessly graceful. Her smile was warm, a little nervous, and entirely genuine. "Glad you came," she said softly. Colton nodded. "Thanks for the invite." Inside, the house was filled with the scent of cinnamon and cloves. A small tree stood in the corner, strung with white lights and handmade ornaments. A garland of pine cones stretched across the fireplace, and the soft hum of Christmas music played in the background. Rosie handed him the card, grinning. "I made it just for you." He untied the ribbon carefully, revealing the crayon-scrawled message. "To Uncle Bear, because you're warm and brave like a real Christmas bear." Colton stared at it longer than he meant to. His throat tightened. He cleared it gently and ruffled her hair. "This might be the best card I've ever gotten." Lisa watched the exchange from the doorway to the kitchen, her arms crossed loosely. Something in her chest softened. She had invited him for Rosie, yes, but also because she could not imagine this night without him. While she returned to the kitchen to check the roast, Colton noticed one of the strands of lights in the living room flickering inconsistently. He traced the cord to an old plug that had come loose behind the shelf. He crouched down and adjusted the connection, twisting the wire until the whole strand lit up steadily. The room brightened. Lisa returned just in time to see it. Her eyes widened. "Did you fix that?" Colton stood, brushing off his hands. It was nothing. "I've been meaning to call someone for weeks," she said. He gave a small shrug. "Only thing I ever got good at was fixing broken stuff. Sometimes it helps to keep the lights on." Lisa stood still, her gaze softening in the way that said she heard more than his words. She did not answer. She did not need to. Dinner was simple but heartfelt. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and warm bread. Rosie insisted on lighting the candles herself, her face glowing with excitement. After dessert, the three of them moved to the living room, Rosie curled up in a blanket between Colton and Shadow, her head resting on the dog's shoulder. Colton began telling her a story, his voice low and steady, painting a picture of a brave firefighter who rescued a little princess lost in a winter storm. Lisa sat nearby, watching them, her hand wrapped around a mug of tea. The way Rosie's eyes fluttered shut mid-story. The way Colton gently adjusted the blanket over her shoulders. The way Shadow stayed completely still beneath her. It was the kind of moment Lisa never thought she would see. It looked nothing like the perfect family portraits in magazines. It was better, more honest, more real. Rosie was fast asleep before the story ended. Lisa rose quietly to take her to bed, and when she returned, Colton was standing by the door, ready to leave. She opened it for him. Snow had started to fall, light, silent flakes dancing in the porch light. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For tonight. For everything." Colton met her eyes. "Thank you for inviting me." For a long moment, they stood there, neither stepping back, neither moving forward. The snow kept falling. And though no words were spoken, something unspoken passed between them. Not yet love, but no longer strangers. Not anymore. It was a week after Christmas when Lisa stopped by Colton's cabin again, this time without Rosie and without baked goods. She stood at his porch, with both hands tucked into the pockets of her long coat, the sky overcast behind her, snow crunching lightly underfoot. Colton opened the door, surprised to see her alone. "Everything all right?" She smiled. "Yes, I just needed to ask you something. May I come in for a minute?" He stepped aside without a word. Shadow gave a single tail thump in greeting from the rug by the fire. Lisa glanced around, then turned to him. "I want to offer you something. A job. At my company." Colton's brow furrowed. "Doing what?" "Security. Part-time, flexible hours. Nothing fancy. Just a way to ease back into things, if you want it." He exhaled slowly, then shook his head. "I'm not looking for a paycheck, Lisa." "I know," she said gently. "But that's not why I'm asking." He looked at her. "We're working on a new product, software designed to help veterans with PTSD. Therapy access, symptom tracking, support groups. It's early, but promising. The team needs insight from someone who's actually lived it. Someone who understands what it means to come home and still feel like you haven't." Colton went quiet. He stared into the fireplace, watching a log split in the heat. "You'd be helping," she added, "not just standing around." That word, helping, carried more weight than she realized. After a long pause, he said, "I'll think about it." She nodded. "That's all I ask." 2 weeks later, Colton stepped into the modern, glass-walled lobby of Marlowe Medical Tech. His boots echoed awkwardly on the polished floor. He wore a button-down shirt Rosie had picked out for him, light blue, slightly wrinkled, and held a visitor's badge Lisa had left at the front desk. People glanced up as he passed. Some smiled, a few stared. He kept walking. Lisa greeted him on the second floor with a grin. "You showed up. I said I would." She handed him a tablet. "Orientation time." He blinked. "What happened to just standing around?" She laughed. "You'll still stand. but you'll stand smart." Over the next few days, Colton fumbled with tech devices, misread the dress code, and addressed 2 interns as ma'am and sir out of old habit. But no one mocked him. In fact, most were quietly impressed by his presence, how he never raised his voice, how people instinctively listened when he spoke. On his 3rd day, Rosie visited with Lisa during lunch. She toddled into the security office carrying a paper bag decorated with crayon drawings and heart stickers. "For you," she announced, handing it over proudly. Colton opened it and pulled out a stretchy rubber bracelet. It was bright blue, with white block letters that read, "Best Hero Ever." He stared at it for a second, his throat catching. "Did you make this?" Rosie nodded. "So you don't forget." Colton slid it onto his wrist and kept his hand over it for a moment. "I won't." Lisa watched quietly from the doorway. The hard edges in his posture had softened, the shadows in his eyes a little lighter. He still walked with caution through the world. But for the first time in years, he was walking forward. Colton had grown used to the rhythm of his days, quiet mornings at the cabin, evenings with Rosie on his lap reading books she barely understood, Lisa's laughter echoing from the kitchen. It was not the life he once knew, but it had become something steady. Without labels or ceremony, they had formed a kind of family. Rosie now called him Uncle Bear, a name that filled his chest with something warm and unspoken. And Lisa, she had become the center of that quiet world. When she told him about the AI platform her company was developing for veterans with PTSD, inspired by his story, he felt a flicker of pride he hadn't felt in years. He had watched her work tirelessly. Late nights, red eyes, endless focus. She said it wasn't just software. It was a promise, a lifeline for those still fighting invisible wars. Then everything began to fall apart. It started with one article. A fringe blog posted an anonymous claim that Lisa had used her connection with a veteran for publicity. The story spread like wildfire. Headlines twisted the truth. Screenshots were doctored, clips taken out of context. CEO exploits tragedy for product launch. Colton watched Lisa try to hold the line. Press releases, meetings, transparency, but the backlash grew. Her board turned silent. Investors pulled away. The launch was postponed. Lisa, once so composed, sat at the table one night with her head in her hands, face pale and drawn. "I just wanted to help," she whispered. "Now they say I'm a fraud." Colton didn't try to reason with her. He simply reached out and held her hand. The next morning, he was gone before she woke up. Lisa found out what he had done hours later, on the internet. Colton stood in front of a community center, no podium, no PR team, just him and a few local reporters. His voice was quiet but steady. "I was a soldier. I lost someone who saved my life. I came home, but part of me didn't. For years I felt nothing. Then I met Lisa Marlowe. She didn't ask for my pain. She listened and gave me a reason to start again." He pulled a dog tag from his pocket. "I wore this for 15 years to remember what I lost. I took it off the day I realized I didn't have to live in the past anymore. She was the reason." He handed the tag to a reporter. "That's the truth. Do what you want with it." The video went viral. Thousands of comments poured in. Veterans, families, strangers. The narrative flipped. Donors returned. Investors recommitted. Lisa's name was cleared. The mission was back on track. What Lisa didn't know, until days later, was that Colton had turned down a network interview that same day. $10,000, national exposure. He refused. He knew what they'd do with her image. With Rosie's. He chose to protect them instead. That evening, Lisa drove to the cabin. The sun was low. She found Colton splitting wood behind the house. He looked up, sensing her. "You didn't have to save me," she said. "I didn't do it because I had to." "Then why?" Colton stepped closer. "Because you matter, and if they couldn't see your heart, I wanted to show them." She didn't reply. Her lips trembled. And then, behind her, Rosie came running from the truck, arms wide. "Daddy Bear," she cried, throwing herself against him. Colton froze. Then slowly, He knelt, arms wrapping around her small frame, her head tucked under his chin. And for the first time in a long, long while, something broken inside him began to heal. He didn't need medals or applause. This, right here, was enough. The invitation came on a Thursday afternoon, simple and unexpected. Lisa's voice over the phone was soft, almost hesitant. "We're not celebrating anything. I'd like to cook dinner. For you. For us." Colton paused. He looked out the window of the security office, where Rosie's bracelet, best hero ever, still rested snugly on his wrist. "I'll be there at 6, he said. That evening, he arrived to find the house bathed in a soft golden glow. Strings of warm lights ran along the ceiling, candles flickered gently on the dining table, and the smell of something burning but not entirely unpleasant drifted from the kitchen. Rosie answered the door, her hair in uneven pigtails and cheeks dusted with flour. "Uncle Bear, Mommy says dinner is edible." Lisa appeared behind her, apron askew, a wooden spoon in one hand. "Barely," she admitted, laughing. "But we have wine and backup pizza." The meal was simple. Slightly overcooked pasta. Garlic bread that leaned more char than toast. But the warmth at the table made it perfect. Rosie had drawn little place cards with stick figures and hearts, proudly announcing she was head of decorations. Shadow lay curled near the front door, eyes half closed, as if he too understood the peace in the room. Colton shared stories from his childhood, not the ones with pain or uniforms, but the ones with bikes and scraped knees and stolen apples. Lisa listened, chin in hand, laughing freely for the first time in what felt like months. Halfway through the meal, Rosie accidentally knocked over her glass of water. It tipped and spilled across the table. Lisa flinched, shoulders tight, eyes darting to the mess, as if expecting chaos to follow. Before she could react, Colton reached over, gently placed his hand on hers and said, "It's all right. You don't have to fix everything. Not tonight. Here, we're safe." Lisa froze. Then slowly, she looked at his hand over hers, and something in her eyes shifted. Her lips parted, not to respond, but to breathe. And then, quietly, she smiled. A real smile. Not the practiced kind she wore in meetings. Not the strained one she used to reassure investors. This was hers. After dinner, Colton helped wash dishes while Rosie built a fort of pillows and blankets in the living room. He dried the plates. She handed him each one like a sacred treasure. They did not need to speak. Later, Rosie fell asleep halfway through a movie. Shadow laid his head near her, as if keeping watch. Colton rose quietly and reached for his coat. Lisa walked him to the door. The air outside was crisp, the kind of cold that tingled in your nose but didn't sting. He stood there a moment, hesitant. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a weathered notebook. Old, its corners bent, its cover worn soft by time. He flipped to a folded page and handed it to her. "My friend wrote this in Afghanistan. The one who didn't make it back." Lisa unfolded the page, eyes scanning the line at the top. "If you ever meet a woman who makes you want to live one more day, don't let her go." Colton looked at her, steady and open. "I think I've found her," he said quietly. Lisa didn't speak. She folded the page back with care, pressed it against her chest. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, holding him not as a guest, not as a friend, but as someone who belonged. There were no declarations, no promises, just two people, both a little scarred, both still healing, finally finding rest in each other's presence. The porch light above them flickered gently, casting a soft halo on the snow-dusted ground. Inside, Rosie stirred in her sleep and murmured, "Night-night, Daddy Bear," without even knowing he was still there. The morning sun filtered through the tall pines surrounding the meadow, casting golden light across the grass. Vermont in summer smelled of wildflowers and warm earth. The air buzzed with quiet anticipation. Rosie darted through rows of white chairs, her pink dress fluttering like a petal in the breeze. She clutched a bouquet of daisies and forget-me-nots, beaming as she zigzagged between guests with pure 3-year-old joy. At the end of the garden, Lisa stood beneath a wooden arch, wrapped in greenery and ivory ribbons. Her blonde hair was swept into a soft bun, loose curls framing her face. She wore a simple, flowing white dress, and her eyes sparkled as she looked down the path. The music changed. Gasps and smiles spread as Shadow trotted down the aisle, calm and focused, a satin ribbon around his neck. 2 gold rings dangled from it, catching the light. He reached the altar, sat beside Lisa, and waited. Then Colton appeared. Dressed in a dark gray suit, his first in over 10 years, he walked steadily, his eyes locked on Lisa. His stance held the strength of a soldier, but the guarded weight had lifted. He moved like a man who had found peace. At the altar stood an older man in uniform, weathered and dignified. He had once commanded Colton in war. Today, he would guide him into something even braver. "When I first met Colton," he began, voice low and steady, he was a Marine with too much silence in his heart. "One day, he told me, 'Sir, I'm not sure I remember how to love.'" The man looked between the couple. "Today, I have my answer." The guests grew still. A few wiped their eyes. Others simply watched, moved by the quiet power of the moment. Then Rosie stepped forward, holding a sheet of paper covered in crayon hearts and stars. Her small voice trembled with focus. "I wish Daddy Bear takes me to school every day. I wish Mommy laughs every day. I wish we are a family forever." Lisa pulled her into an embrace, tears falling freely. Colton knelt beside them, kissed Rosie's forehead, then Lisa's. When he slid the ring onto Lisa's finger, his hands trembled, but his voice did not. "You're my home." Later that day, as the sun dipped below the tree line, the scene shifted to a different kind of sacred space. The old cabin had changed. Where once stood patched shingles and firewood stacks, now a carved wooden sign read, "Veteran Healing Center." Inside, children's drawings lined the walls. The common room echoed with quiet laughter and conversations. Veterans sipped coffee in rocking chairs. Therapy dogs lay at their feet. Lisa oversaw operations with quiet confidence. Colton led group sessions, tended to garden beds, and ran breathing workshops. Shadow, now wearing a vest marked Certified Four-Legged Therapist, lay beside him during every session. Out front, the old dog rested beneath a tree, eyes half closed, still watching over his people. Above the doorway, carved into the wood, were the words, "From the fire, we found light." In the backyard, a wooden swing swayed gently in the golden dusk. Colton pushed Rosie higher with each swing. Her giggles rang out through the trees, arms outstretched like wings. Lisa sat nearby on a bench, reading a paperback, eyes closed to the setting sun. Shadow lay in the grass between them, ears twitching, always listening. "Faster, Daddy Bear, higher," Rosie shouted, her voice soaring with the wind. The camera pulled back, catching the swing's arc, the laughter, the light spilling through the leaves. A family, once broken, now whole. And a final voice spoke, steady, soft, full of wonder. He once believed the fire had destroyed everything, but it turns out it simply cleared the way for something beautiful to begin. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of healing, hope, and unexpected love. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, don't forget to support us by hitting the hype button. It lets us know you want more stories that speak to the soul. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories, where we bring you powerful, heartwarming tales that remind us all of the beauty found in resilience, compassion, and second chances. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and keep believing in the quiet heroes all around us.